Hello and welcome to a rather unusual video for this channel. Today we're going to be making my grandparents' favorite chocolate candies. These have become somewhat famous in the family and we have a problem with them disappearing a bit too quickly. So this video is primarily intended so that we can distribute it and maybe put a little bit less strain on my grandparents' supply now that we make some more. So I try to make this pretty simple. It's not the simplest recipe, but it doesn't have to be complicated. You're going to see how little I care about being exactly precise with ingredients, and that's one of the nice things about cooking as opposed to flying. Precision is not that essential, at least not with a dish like this. Here is some butter. I'm using plant-based butter just because that is the dietary needs for the people I'm making this for. You can use regular butter, it does not matter. We're going to need 5 tablespoons, so you just count there and then a little bit extra. You can see, again, how little I care. So there's 5, there's half, I don't know, there-ish. Yeah, that's probably fine. So I'll cut it here. And that should be pretty good. From here, we're going to take this 5 and some extra tablespoons of butter in this microwave-safe. At least we put it in the microwave regularly, so I assume it's safe. We'll put it in here and we're going to partially melt it. Here's our first pass through the microwave, only about 20 seconds, and that looks like that's probably good enough. It's somewhat liquidy, there's still some solids in there. That's pretty good. The mixing bowl I like to use, it's a decent size. Works fine. We're just going to dump this in, all of it, essentially. Now that we have the butter in here, we're just going to mix it around some. Some of the instructions that I've seen say to cream it. It's not that important, just get it mixed around, get some air integrated, and that's going to be just fine. That looks great. The next thing we're going to need is a cup of flour. Now, I typically use tapioca flour, and so that's an option there. This is pretty expensive though. You can also go to a Chinese market or an Asian market and get something like this. It's the exact same thing and costs substantially less. But again, it's just tapioca. It doesn't have to be tapioca though. It could be regular flour, it could be almond flour. I've got a little bit of this red corn flour, that's probably the wrong thing. It doesn't really matter that much though. This recipe is extremely versatile. So I'm going to do, I don't like to do completely tapioca. That can be a little much, but what I am going to do is get a little bit of this regular cake flour. That looks fine there. Slide that on down. And sure, let's throw a little bit of this red corn flour in just because I have it. You can use what you have. Use the leftovers. Use whatever flour you have a whole bunch of. No need to get anything special for this. Now, I do like to have at least 50% tapioca in here. It just makes the resulting crust a little bit crispier, a little bit crunchier. It's easier to handle as well if you want to move it from one container to another. It holds its shape better than regular flour. So we're going to use at least 50% of that, and it does go everywhere. It's like talcum powder. It's extremely fine. You can see I'm keeping it very far from myself so it doesn't get all over my nice flight school polo. And there, that's all our flour in there. And I'm going to be making another batch, so I'm not going to clean all this stuff up quite yet. So now that we have the flour into the butter, we're just going to mix that all in here. And what it's going to do is it's going to start to integrate. As the butter mixes in with the flour, it becomes somewhat flaky here. Next, we want cocoa powder. My grandparents are really big chocolate fans, so we're going to use a little extra here. You could use 2 tablespoons, but I'm going to go for 3. I like a little extra chocolate in the crust, and really everywhere. And I'm not shy with them. That's definitely more than a tablespoon, but it doesn't really matter. That's fine. That's fine. And then a little more for good measure. There. An amount of chocolate powder. That is just fine. There is no need to be very precise with this. Now some of the butter's clinging back there. I could use a knife to get that off, or I could just kind of scrape it back there and then. Now that we have that, we want 1/3 of a cup of powdered sugar. I don't like using powdered sugar because it's just not the best for you, and I don't think it tastes all that great, to be honest. So I use this monk fruit sweetener. It's not the same thing as powdered sugar. Guess what? It doesn't matter. That's the beautiful thing about this recipe. It really doesn't care all that much. So there's my whole cup. I'm gonna do roughly a third. If it's a little over or under sweet, not a big deal on the crust. That's roughly a third of a cup. It's probably not perfect. I don't really care. And now we'll integrate that in there with the rest. But it's still pretty dry, so that's where an egg comes in. I use half of an egg. Please don't judge my egg cracking. I'm really quite bad at it. We'll see if I can get it to work okay. Yeah, close enough. I don't like to waste any, so I'll do it like that. I mean, I'm always wasting some, but... And then we're going to mix it up. I want the yolk integrated. Some recipes for a tart crust like this will call for just the white. It doesn't matter that much. At least not for this one. We're going to pour roughly half of that in here. Maybe slightly more than half. I don't know. It's just how it went. We'll save the other half for the next batch. Just keep stirring. And now it's getting to a consistency where if I bunch it up, you can see it actually is starting to hold its shape. It stays dry, but once you compress it together, now we have more of a solid block of something, and this is what we're going for. Now it's still just a little crumbly, so I might need a little bit more liquid for this one. So let's just do a little bit of extra butter, maybe another half tablespoon, and that could have been from the extra flour that I put in there from not caring. This is more of a dish that you do by feel. It does not have to be very precise. You can make small adjustments like we did there. And that right there is what we were looking for, where all the dough forms one ball. It really didn't take much. But if stirring and stirring and stirring doesn't quite do it, you can just do a tiny bit of extra liquid like that, and that will do it. Or if it's too liquidy, you can add a little bit of extra flour just to dry it out. But just get that correct consistency where it'll, almost like Play-Doh, pick up any of the extra dry ingredients or clumps that might be floating around in there. And that bowl gets pretty clean. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. And that's a pretty good block of dough if all you want is a nice chocolate crust. Now, we like to have a lot of extra nuts in here, and believe it or not, this will actually about double in volume when I'm done adding nuts to it, and it'll take it. It does not mind having a bunch of those extra clumps of ingredients in there because they don't really steal any of the liquid, they just get suspended in the solution, so to speak. I don't know, that amount. It's roughly half the bag. Chopped walnuts, sure, I'll do some of them too. Looks like an awful lot, but it will take them. So just like I was doing before with all the clumps of dough, I'm just folding this block in half and then shoving it down into the chopped up nuts, and they just stick to it, and as you keep working it, they get integrated into the dough just like it was before. And that is our block of dough with a whole bunch of walnuts and pecans. Now, this might not be quite enough saran wrap, but that's okay. I can get another piece and add it to it. The way it sticks to itself is pretty good. Make it more and more cube-like as we push it down into this plastic. There we go. And of course, have a clean counter when you do this, if I didn't say that already. There's a decent block, wrapped pretty tight, not a lot of air space in there. And then this needs to go into the refrigerator for 8 hours. Now, I'm doing this wrong. Don't do it wrong like me, but I don't have a ton of time. So I'm going to put it in the freezer for about an hour, and then I'll move it to the refrigerator, and hopefully that'll get it colder a little bit quicker. But that is not correct. If you want better results, put it in the refrigerator overnight, at least 8 hours. Once this thing is thoroughly chilled, it's a lot easier to roll out or spread out into the shape that you want. That dough will become a bottom crust, and then from there we'll put more chocolate on top. This time I'm going to try to use some of the almond flour to make the second block of dough. So we'll just use this up because we have it and there's not a whole lot of it left. That about halfway filled up the thing. And then we'll just do the rest as tapioca. Not quite as adventurous on this one. I might upset a few people. I've learned from doing these YouTube videos for a while that people do get very upset sometimes when you challenge one of their beliefs. Or don't even challenge it, but just say something that might be wrong. And maybe I am wrong to not care so much about which ingredients and what amounts I use. That can absolutely be a problem in some settings, but the nice thing with cooking is it's personal preference. Yes, this might be the wrong way to make a tart crust, but I don't really care. It creates a final product that myself and my family really like, so why change it? We like it, so we're happy with what we've got. Why not keep making it this way? So I'm just showing you how I'm doing it, not so much the correct way. And here's my 3 very generous tablespoons of cocoa powder. Again, I don't care that much. That's an amount. It's an amount that I'm going to be happy with. And here's some of that monk fruit sweetener. Maybe a little less this time, maybe the same amount, I don't know. Yeah, this is already behaving a lot better than the last batch. I bet I was wrong to use that corn flour that last time. It worked, I just had to work a lot harder. Corn does absorb an awful lot of moisture for whatever reason. I'm sure there's some physics to it, but this is a little bit more common to what I get, where it's a lot more liquidy as I'm stirring it. It just really wants to clump up even before I add the egg. Yeah, this is much more what I'm used to. And then we'll put the egg in there, that last little bit. This one is substantially more liquidy. So maybe I want some more tapioca, maybe not. I'm going to add the nuts and then see where it's at. I could have picked up some of this tapioca I spilled earlier though. There's an idea. And these are freshly spilled ingredients, and they're ingredients that go into this, so why not? There's some bits from the last batch. That's fine, we'll just pick them up. And yes, I did wipe this counter down, it's very clean. There's quite a forgiving margin for error in all this stuff, which is nice. Now we'll wrap that in plastic wrap. There. After about an hour in the freezer, these are pretty solid now, which is about what we want. We're going to have to spread them out on these pans, which can be tricky. They're pretty close to what they would be like if they were to be in the refrigerator overnight, but that really is the best way to do it, not the rushed way that I'm doing. But now we need to spread them out on these pans. I have 2, I'll just put the larger block of dough on the larger pan. While we're doing that, we're going to preheat the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So we'll get that going. Now, you can spray these with nonstick. I'm not a huge fan of spraying them with oil. I just use coconut oil, it works fine. And I just take a knife and take a good amount, place it down on there, and then another good amount, place it down on that one, and I just kind of spread it by hand and wash my hands when I'm done. This is a little more natural, you know, there's no preservatives or anything crazy in there. It's just oil, and it'll prevent the dough from sticking to the pan. And so if it accomplishes that job without having to ingest a bunch of weird chemicals that probably shouldn't be eaten, that's great. And that brings up a good point. I would not call this a healthy dessert. I don't know if there is such thing as a healthy dessert, but it's certainly closer than most. It is a less bad for you dessert, is what I often say. It is less terrible than other kinds of candies or desserts would be. We'll unwrap this and then just place it down. Now it's going to be really stiff at first because of all that cold, but as you start to spread it, it will start to behave. And then we can take the rolling pin to it. Now, one issue you'll run into is the handles will hit the edges of the pan, and that is mildly irritating. This can be fixed in a few different ways. The other issue I'm running into is stuff sticking to the rolling pin. So if these are problems, you can spread it by hand. Typically I use a PVC pipe because things don't really stick to that quite as well. But I couldn't find it today, so we'll have to use the wooden rolling pin. You could also try and wrap it in this and spread it out. So this is another trick that I've done before, is where I use the actual saran wrap that I used, or I use the plastic wrap from before, and then just force it down and spread it out. That can work well too. So I'm going to try that because it just wants to stick so badly to this wood, and I'll roll it under the plastic, and that'll help it not stick quite so bad. Yeah, much better. It takes quite some weight to make it go. As this stuff is cold, it just does not want to conform too well. But just keep working at it, it will go. If you get to a spot the rolling pin just can't reach at this point, sometimes it's easier just to go back at it and mash it down by hand. It does work. It's not quite as uniform. There. So now at these edges, we're just going to try and make it a little bit more defined. It doesn't have to completely cover the pan. It can. It does make life easier later. I think that's about as thin as we're going to get it with the pecans and walnuts in here. Otherwise, they'll just get crushed and spread apart. So that will work. What we're going to do next is poke a bunch of holes in it with a fork. This is just to prevent steam from building up. And this is tricky with the nuts. Yeah, so if a little chunk comes out, it can stick to the prongs of the fork and make it a little harder. And that's probably about good enough. And that was really well timed. I couldn't have done it that well if I tried. And now we'll do the next block. About the same way, but this time I'm going to cover it to begin with. That will be just fine. We'll put those in for maybe 20-25 minutes, see how they're doing. And there's our time recorded. We can go ahead and throw this away. We don't need our plastic wrap anymore. Next, we're going to want a large pot. This will do nicely. We'll put it there, and I'll bring the camera over so we can see this a little better. We're going to use this to create the chocolate that goes on top of the crust. And before we do that, I do want to do a brief discussion on chocolate you can buy at the store. So here's one of the many options you can get. What I typically look for is really low sugar. So this is, as you can see right here, 6 grams of total added sugar. That's a bit on the higher end, and some are even worse, like semi-sweet or even milk chocolate. Those can be even higher. What I tend to look for is this is 5 grams. That's not bad. That's these ones. But these ones are really good. These are as low as, these are only 4 grams of added sugar, which is really good. So this is expensive, but it's great. But typically, your dark chocolate morsels are going to be, or chocolate chips, or whatever you want to call them. The dark chocolate ones tend to be the lowest sugar. Semi-sweet sounds like it wouldn't be that much, but it typically is more sugar than those. So we're going to prioritize these two since they're lower sugar, and then we'll probably do some of these. You want a decent amount of chocolate, and we're also going to need a spoon. When you don't have a whole team helping you, you have to figure it out as you go a little bit more. I'm going to put in an amount of this almond milk. Doesn't really matter what you use. You can use regular milk. You can use water probably. I'm just going to use almond milk. It's what we typically use. I'm going to put in some like that. I don't know. I do this by feel. Then we'll add our chocolate to here and let it start melting. Now we could just melt the chocolate and spread that on there, and that would be fine. But the reason I do all these extra steps is to further decrease that sugar content. By adding almond milk, and then we're going to add a bunch of cocoa powder, we'll make a chocolate that's not very sweet, and then we can add back sweetness as we want to with something a little healthier, like monk fruit, rather than sugar. I'm going to turn down the heat some. We have plenty of time before those things, before the crusts are done in the oven. While that continues to melt, I'm also going to add a generous amount of coconut oil. I don't like to do it too terribly much because then it starts to render out and you'll see it when you're cooking. And that doesn't look great. It's fine, it just doesn't look very good. So I do about that much. However much that is. We can add more if we want to for the consistency, but a little bit of coconut oil will help it have a more glossy finish when it all hardens up in the refrigerator. It just makes it look a little nicer. The next thing we're going to do is cocoa powder. This makes a much darker chocolate in flavor because the percentage of cocoa is going way up. I've tried doing just the cocoa powder, almond milk, the coconut oil, but it never really solidifies. You need a little bit of store-bought chocolate because it has some of the other like cocoa fats and solids in there. So having a little bit of some store-bought chocolate just to help it get started and also to help it firm up at the end is pretty good. So that's a decent amount of chocolate there. Still not quite as much as I want, so I'll just add another bag of this stuff. We do have to cover both of those batches of dough that we made. And a little more cocoa powder just to make it a little darker. I can always add more almond milk as necessary. This is really just by feel. I'm creating the amount that I want. I know what tastes good, at least to my family and I. So this is what we do. Just add ingredients as we want to. Get the right amount. But it doesn't really matter. You could just melt the chocolate chips straight and put those on there. No problem at all. You could add a little bit of cocoa powder just to dilute the sweetness a little bit. So there, it's quite thick now. It's almost cake batter-like. So we might have a little bit too much of the solid ingredients in here. So we can add a little more of the almond milk just to dilute it down slightly. I don't want to add too much though. Too much could be a problem. And there, that's probably a good amount. It's probably a good consistency, at least with the heat that we're at now. So now it's important to sample it. Make sure it is sweet enough for your liking. As far as sweetness goes, that's not bad at all. I'll just do a little bit of this monk fruit, but not much. If you need it sweeter, add more of this stuff. That's pretty good. I might have gotten it just slightly too sweet. More cocoa powder, and then a little more almond milk. Not much. Now, if you want a simpler dessert, just taking this and spreading it over raspberries, strawberries, blueberries, things of that nature, that can be really good. Just put a little bit of this down, put your berries or fruits down that you like, put more of this on top, encase them in the chocolate, put them in the refrigerator, and let that solidify. That's fantastic, just as is. Judging by the smell and slight discoloration right here along the edges, the crusts are just starting to burn a little bit, but they're not hard yet. So what we're going to do is just turn off the oven and let it keep baking on the residual heat at a slightly lower temperature, and we'll see if that firms it up without burning it too much more. And I guess I should clarify, it's not so much burning, it's just tapioca flour kind of chars a little bit, not horribly. And it does taste bad hot. This is one of very few things that will taste terrible when you pull it out of the oven. Just let it cool, trust the process, and it tastes a lot better once it cools down. Just a weird quirk of tapioca. This piece of dough was on the top rack, so it cooked a lot faster, and you can see it charred a little bit around here. That's completely fine. If it still feels a little spongy, that's not uncommon when you use this tapioca flour. And so this is actually pretty good. So now we're just gonna take some of this chocolate here, and it's really simple, and you're just gonna put it on top like that. It's really not too terribly difficult. Be very generous with it. More chocolate is usually a good thing, at least in the case of this. I'm trying to use just under half of it since the other one that's going to come out is slightly larger. And now I'm just going to spread this around. Really simple. Now this is one way that you can do it. I'm going to show you two different styles here. And I'm not going to get it quite up to the edges yet because this is actually going to go back in the oven to melt into place really nicely on top of its dough. Now I'm going to take an assortment of nuts. We have our walnuts, pecans, and peanuts. Peanuts are my grandparents' favorite. They give it a very nice flavor. So we're just going to spread them on there like that. And then they'll get roasted a little bit as the chocolate melts. It's very good. So we'll do a nice, generous amount of those. I'll kind of just mash them in a little bit. Now that'll go back in the oven. There's still plenty of heat in that oven. Although before I do that, I'm going to pull out the other. And that too, just starting to char a little bit around the edges, that's fine. And so that is one way you can do it. If you like chocolate and you like nuts in the chocolate, that's a great way to make a really nice chocolate candy. However, if you are like my family and you like these things even more, we can spread peanut butter down on this before we put the chocolate on top. If you can find peanut butter that's this simple, where it's just ground up peanuts and nothing else, that's pretty good. And when it's a little bit runny like this, that's even better. Now we're just going to spread this all over the dough that we've made. And now we will spread the chocolate on top. And we'll use all of it this time. The pot comes fairly clean. This stuff comes out really nicely. It really won't be too bad to wash that and get all that stuff out the rest of the way. And now spread this chocolate just like we did the last one, but now we have that layer of peanut butter in between. This has a much thicker layer of chocolate than the other, and that's fine too. More variety between the batches. And now we'll do the same thing we did before, where we spread the nuts on top. That looks pretty good. That'll go back in the oven too. Now, I did set the oven to 250 just so that it doesn't get too cool in there while we're remelting the chocolate a little bit. As the chocolate starts to run, we'll pull those out of the oven and then put them in the refrigerator and let them solidify. Here they are out of the oven. They were starting to burn just slightly, so it was time to pull them out. We're going to let these cool down and then put them in the refrigerator, let them firm up. From there, what I do is I usually cut them with a spatula or something into little blocks and stack them up into some plastic containers and freeze them. Usually only keep one container in the refrigerator at a time, the one that you're actively eating from, and then keep the others frozen. But it didn't spread out quite as much as it sometimes does. That can be just a difference of consistency, how much almond milk versus coconut oil versus chocolate did I have in there. But it still spread out just slightly, and it did toast these peanuts slightly, which makes them taste a little bit better. Now, I have not given these enough time to cool properly, but just for demonstration purposes and the interest of finishing this video recording, this is how I typically cut them. You want a spatula like this that's plastic but very strong so that you can really push down and break through that crust. It takes quite a bit right there at the end. I normally cut it into chunks about this size, going along the perimeter. Do a bunch of these, and then you can hit this direction. And there you are. That's what one of the chocolate candies looks like. You can see the cross section there. And there's what that one looks like when it has a little bit of peanut butter in there. And then it wouldn't be a good video unless we saw how it tasted, so we'll see how this goes. Yep, that's about what I remember. The crust gives it a nice crunchiness, and then the chocolate is chocolate. It's just great. And the really nice thing about a dessert like this is that it's not all that sweet. So many American desserts are just so sweet, and this is really refreshing to have something that's, I mean, it's still a dessert. It's not good for you, but it's a lot better than some of the alternatives. So thank you so much for watching. Give that a go and tell me what you thought in the comments if you like it as much as I do.